The key message is that there is a need for greater enforcement capabilities, flag state enforcement, and that's very important, port state enforcement. We are going to be looking at ballast water management issues in our seminar, our symposium, I should say, which I think is presently a matter of great confusion for people in the industry. Many ship owners are not quite clear on what the rules are going to be. The biggest issue that I think we face in the maritime industry is the actual cost of compliance. In other words, the fact that it is becoming increasingly expensive to invest in the technology and the equipment to meet the requirements of MARPOL, the Maritime Pollution Convention, and SOLAS, Safety of Life at Sea. This is going to require, frankly, bigger investment, more investment by the banker. We used to say bankers. It isn't so much bankers today, but certainly venture capital. We are expanding our strategic and our joint agreements with various agencies in the United States and Canada. NAMEPA is the North American Marine Pollution Association. And to protect the marine environment in a continent the size of North America really means joining industry and government and the private sector together in cooperative arrangements. We've been very successful in the last 7 years of our existence in bringing together the U.S. Coast Guard, which is our port state control organization, NOAA, which is the Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and a number of other agencies of the federal government, and we're working on more agencies of the federal government, also with the states, because we have a federal system in both Canada and the United States. That's been the thrust of our activities. The other thing that's very important is education, particularly of young people, because our message to the public, when we think is very important, and we think that ship owners have not been very successful in this, has been that industry has accomplished a great deal to bring about cleaner seas, safer ships, and much less air pollution and emissions controls. And so that we're going into the schools, we're going into the colleges and universities through distance learning programs and also through direct communication, such as we're doing right now. But a lot of it means going to the teachers, going to the students. There are millions of people who do not know the true story of what the private sector, this whole community that we see here, is doing to provide for a much cleaner environment. You're familiar with the fact that HELMEPA, the Hellenic version, the Hellenic Marine Environment Protection Association, was founded 30 years ago by Mr. Livanos, the late George Livanos, here in Greece. Greece is the mother country for all of the MEPAs, as we call them. And all of them are based on, all of us are based on the same principle. HELMEPA, NAMEPA, TERMEPA, all of them are emphasizing cooperation between the shipping private sector and governments and the community as a whole, the environmental movement. That's very important, I think. Problems that we have is that we want to do, and Greece wants to do, is to recruit more young people into the shipping industry. Where are our crew going to come from? Where are our leaders going to come from in the industry of the future? That means getting young people interested and involved in what we do. First of all, you'll notice, and I've said this many times, this is not intended to flatter Greece or Greeks. You don't have accidents involving Greek shipping, do you? Not anymore. When was the last time you had a major accident with a Greek oil tanker, a Greek-operated oil tanker? Competence is the key. Training is the key. Experience is the key. The Costa Concordia is a case in point. I mean, that whole thing should never have happened. In Korea, the Jewol, that ship was overloaded. There was no opportunity for those young people, the 600 students that were on that ship. They weren't able to get off. Why? How is it that you can have a ferry, which is a relatively small ship, not have proper evacuation procedures? That is the kind of thing that we see happening. First of all, there is still an attitude in some countries and in some parts of the world that shipping is something that is not emphasized. You can get on an airplane, and I'm sure you've flown in different places, and you go through a whole series of precautionary measures to make sure that every passenger knows how to get off that plane in a hurry, if they can. The same should be true with ships. But the safety record of our industry, the safety record of shipping, is excellent. It's better than any other mode of transportation, including rail, including road, certainly, and including aviation. We're very proud of that, and I think we should be around the world. The fact that there are still accidents is evidence that some countries do not have as strong, and we see this in the Philippines, for example, with ferry boat accidents. You've seen it in Bangladesh with ferry boat accidents recently. There is concern about the safety of passenger vessels, but there are certain specific areas where we feel that stronger enforcement is needed. And that enforcement should come from the International Maritime Organization. When the IMO was founded in London in the 1940s, it was called a consultative organization. It had no enforcement powers whatsoever. That is now changing. And what is developing is an international and global system of enforcement. One thing that I think is very important that I want to emphasize is that what you have just asked, enforcement cannot be done on a nation-by-nation basis. It must be worldwide. It must be global, because the system won't work. We have seen that. If you say, well, Greece is going to have its own system and we'll leave it to Korea to do their own enforcement, that is where the failure lies, in our opinion. There must be the same structure of enforcement everywhere in the world. You can't make exceptions for third world or developing countries, as we have seen. That's where most of these accidents take place. Now, the other thing that I want to mention is the International Safety Management Code, ISM. The Costa Concordia was a very safe ship, but the owners and operators do not seem to have realized that that ship was being sailed as a matter of course, very close to land, in areas where it was likely to hit a rock eventually, or at least possible to hit a rock. Why didn't they know this at headquarters? Many of the problems involving safety at sea are not problems on the ship. They're problems ashore. The management of the Costa Concordia is an excellent company. It's a very well-known company. They should have known and spotted the fact that that particular skipper, that captain of that ship, was sailing habitually close to the rock, to islands, so that the passengers could look at the scenery. You know, it's easy for us to judge now, of course. I realize that after the fact. But experts, I think, would have said, no, you can't do that. You've got to go further out. Why didn't they do that? And we're very fortunate that we have not had heavy loss of life in these accidents. Korea is an exception, and the Philippines is an exception. But again, look at all the ferries you have here in Greece. You have a marvelous safety record. You know, they know what they're doing. I think the message here, and it's one that I spoke about yesterday at a conference that we had at the Astor Palace, is that one area that we must emphasize. I'm very satisfied with the safety record and also the operational record that the ship owners are bringing around the world to the industry. I'm also optimistic about our environmental record. But what is happening is since 2008, I say the 8th, I mean to say 2008, many banks that have lent money to the shipping industry, here in Greece particularly, have really gone out of the business of lending money to ship owners. The Royal Bank of Scotland is a good example. The Bank of Scotland has disappeared. Some of the banks here in Greece. Where is the money coming from? It is coming from venture capitalists. It's coming from the stock markets of the world, particularly in the United States. Much of the funding for Greek shipping is now coming from New York City, where I live. The problem with that is that it's bringing people into the structure of shipping who don't know the industry very well. They are not experienced owners and managers, unlike, for example, the Greek shipping community here. And a number of people have said the same thing. We need for these lenders to understand that they must be willing to put money into safety at sea and protection of the marine environment. They're not trained in how to operate a ship. They don't know about how to operate a ship. They are basically financiers. This is creating a disconnect, if you know what I mean, between that part of the industry and the actual cutting edge, which are the people who actually are the ship owners and the vessel operators. And if they do not understand, for example, that ballast water management is going to cost a great deal of money to implement, are we going to get safer ships? The other issue which I would like to mention is that we are still facing a chronic over-tonnaging situation in the industry. We have too many ships that have been built in the last 10 years, mostly in Chinese yards, which are going to have to go into layup. There are questions about the quality of Chinese construction. Much of it now is very good, but there were ships that were built over the last 10 years where we already are seeing serious problems with their actual machinery, with the condition of the hulls. Many of them were built in shipyards in China that were inexperienced or not properly qualified. Many of them were built without the assistance of recognized classification societies. Many of them are ships that are going to have a 15 or 20-year operational life, and we already are seeing major quality problems with those ships. This has been discussed here in the last couple of days. What becomes of those ships? Do we take them out of service? The newer ships that are being built now are of good quality in our experience. But you have a backlog of ships that have been built in the last 10 or 15 years where that is not the case. And we're very worried about that. Most of these are in the dry bulk sector. They're ore carriers, grain carriers. Some of them are in liquid bulk. They're tankers. Those ships are still around there. They're going to be operating. And we think that you're going to see more problems, as we have seen, and you've mentioned a couple of them, where there's hull cracking situations. Some of them are container ships. And there are design problems with some of these ships, but there are also qualitative problems involving the actual hull strength. That is a series of great concern. We think, and we know, I know for a fact, that in the last 16 to 18 months, there have been an increase in the number of detentions by port state control, by the Paris MOU here, in Europe, and by the U.S. Coast Guard, which is the Port State Control Authority for the United States, also Canada. I work with the Tokyo MOU, which is the Asian one, and they have had a lot of problems with some of these newer ships. I think we're on the way to resolving them, but you know how the situation is. You don't take old cars off the road. They're still there. Same thing with some of these ships that are now 5 or 10 years old. I'm sorry to give you such a long answer, but you've raised it. That is a very important question, is the quality of these actual ships. I think we're going to see serious problems and probably more cracking and sinking of these ships. This has happened before, by the way, in our history, going back 20 or 30 years. It's coming back to us now, and that is the biggest critical problem, I think, facing commercial shipping.